The word of today is going to be transpiration. Now, if you're a novice gardener like me, or perhaps you are an expert gardener who wants to share their advice, please do consider subscribing to my channel. Hit the big red button that says subscribe, and that means next time you open the YouTube app on your phone, your laptop or your computer, one of my videos will be waiting for you. Now, in last week's video, when I was showing you around the garden, I showed you my bear's breeches, or acanthus. Now, acanthus isn't the sign of welcome, as I told you last week. I looked it up and I think it's the sign of longevity, and that's why it featured in the carvings and stoneworks of stately homes. And in last week's video, I explained to you that I planted my acanthus. It was a gift from a friend who was dividing her clump, but each of the stems came in looking like a piece of rhubarb or a spring onion, and there were no roots at the end, so I had to get it in the soil as soon as possible. And what's happened, if you look back on last week's video, the plant has just flagged, wilted. That's the word I'm looking for. The plant had just wilted, and I've been noticing from my kitchen windowsill that in the morning it's quite upright, and by the end of the day it has totally flagged. And I was asking my husband what the problem was, and he said it's because the roots aren't sufficiently developed to suck up enough water, and the leaves, because they are large, they are transpiring, and it's that way of the leaves sucking up the water from the roots that keeps the plant alive. And then that started ringing bells for me. Whenever my husband takes a cutting, he always, rather bizarrely to me, always cuts the leaf in half, and I never quite understood why. And he just used to say it's transpiration, and now I think because I've obviously made a mistake here, or my plants are wilting and flagging, I can understand the problem a little bit better. So, for instance here, because the roots aren't taking up enough water and the surface area of the leaf is quite large and the water is transpiring, sort of evaporating out of the plant, they're starting to wilt a little bit, and especially exacerbated by the high winds we've been having at the moment. We're on the tail end of Storm Babette, and although we've had rainfall and some winds, we haven't had the flooding that's taken place in the northern part of the country. So the question is, do I go out now and cut all my flagged leaves in half? The reason why I'm hesitant is it just seems so intrusive. What do you think? Part of what's holding me back is that I love the shape of these leaves, but presumably if I don't take some action now, these leaves aren't, or the plant isn't going to put on enough growth to see it through the winter months. So do I cut every leaf, or just the leaves that are actually flagging? Perhaps I should start off with the flagged leaves first, see how that goes, and then come back for a more drastic haircut in a few days' time. Do you think they're going to perk up? They certainly look better than they did this time last week. The high winds have shaken down some of the fruit from the pear tree, so I'm going to pick all those up and not allow them to rot on the ground. Oh, two down here. These look quite healthy, so I'll probably give them a wash. And my husband will eat those. I don't like the textures of pears. That one's gone rotten, so straight in the compost heap for that. The dahlias are continuing to bloom. Oh, that was another pair just fawning out of the tree. So I must remember to pick that one up too. 3 lovely scarlet dahlias and some of the bright pink over on the sides. I shall be cropping, what, half a dozen heads there and bringing those indoors to enjoy. And I need to have a closer look at the violas in my viola theatre to see which ones need deadheading. It puts me in mind of the old joke, what's worse than seeing a maggot in an apple? Seeing half a maggot, of course. So there's a slug there, but what are these little creepy crawlies? Compost heap? I think my auricular theatre, or my viola theatre, looks really impressive. I must remember to peel these labels off the pot, but perhaps now we've had that bit of rain. They are coming off more easily than they were last week. Just looks a little bit better, doesn't it? And then I need to deadhead them in order to ensure that they keep flowering. And I guess it would make sense if I did this over my compost bucket. So, looking for where the petals have fallen off. Now, is this a spent flower head or one that's just about to come out in bloom? I'm not entirely sure, but I can see that these ones here have gone over, so I'll keep that round one there just until I get my eye in as to whether the viola's at the beginning of its cycle or at the end. Neat little haircut. This one still hasn't come out into flower yet. I don't know whether you can hear it on the camera, but there's 2 black cats which don't belong to us are having a fight in the bottom of the garden. Is it mating season? Cut nice long stems. I can always cut them short when they're in the vase. Gosh, they really are having an argument. They're scampering through our dead hedge and doing all sorts of acrobatics. Not a bad crop for this year's plantings, and it being the last week in October. And another windfall from the pear tree. Just heard this one plop down onto the ground. Absolutely perfect, but tiny. Can you hear the cats now? And this is what my pear harvest looks like at the moment. Other things I've spotted in the garden is this herb. So this is what my friend Julie gave me back in the heat of July. And I've just noticed that where it's been lying on the surface of the soil, I've got some root growth there. So that's probably going to be one that I need to keep under control a little bit. But I'm sure some longer stems there will look great in summer vase arrangements. Do you remember I showed you this zinnia last week when its petals were just starting to unfurl? So I'm going to cut that one from my vase today. I'm probably going to leave the nerines where they are. They're just looking a little bit shaggy and they're coming to the end of their flowering season. I quite like looking at these though from my kitchen windowsill. And I've got a stem of Physostesia to cut. And look at this, a tiny cosmos just growing out of the base of the stem. And then another zinnia, so that's zinnia number 2. And zinnia number 3. I'm looking forward to the day where I can get a whole bed of zinnias instead of these individual stems. Thank you for joining me in today's 20 minutes of gardening. And next week, with it being the first week in November, I'm going to be planting the bulbs I've had delivered from Sarah Raven Flowers. And if you like all things flower arranging with a little bit of craft and charity shop shopping, you ought to head on over to my free Facebook group, Flower Start World, where you can share what you've been up to. You'll find a link to the group in the notes underneath this video. And on that subject, why don't you consider joining my Facebook membership group for behind the scenes extra footage on my videos and access to my free monthly flower arranging club. That's all from me for now, and I'll see you in the garden next time.